First, I would like to introduce Max Holland, who is going to share his narrative with us.
All right, so this is a story about belonging. As an athlete, I have been on many different teams for many different sports. I played 4 seasons of soccer when I was in kindergarten and first grade, and I started gymnastics when I was in second grade, and I started baseball in third. I played volleyball in 8th and 9th grade, and I also became a member of the varsity cheer squad last year. Each team was different and showed me different things about who I am and what it means to belong on a team. The most important teams that shaped me as a person were my travel baseball team, my gymnastics team, and my cheer team. When I was in 8th grade, I tried out for the LYB team and finally made it after being cut on multiple occasions. I was excited to finally be playing baseball at a higher level, something I had dreamed about. Now, I was never a particularly strong baseball player, but I was fast and I was able to catch. The hardest part of the baseball season for me was finding out how to be a part of the team. I was playing with people who I was familiar with, but I had never really talked to, so I didn't know them. Some of these guys had been playing baseball since they were 8 years old. I felt like an outsider coming onto that team. Indoor practices started up, and I was learning everyone's names, making small talk, and just trying to find a place. I made minimal connections with people as practice dragged on, not out of my reluctance to socialize, but because I had so little in common. They all had different friends than I did, they played different video games than I did, and they did different extracurricular activities than I did. Largely, the only thing we really had in common was baseball. The season continued, and as we played together, game after game, I felt more and more like a member of the team. I found a place on that team, but not because I was myself. I had to match my teammates' energy and talk about the things that they talked about, and I wasn't unhappy with that team, and it left me with many fond memories, like the team did when we had a B-dubs. But I never felt like I truly belonged on that team. Now this leads me to my second team, my gymnastics team. I had been doing gymnastics since second grade, and I only recently stopped as of last May. I had been on a number of gymnastics teams, but my final gymnastics team became the Libertyville Gymnastics Academy men's gymnastics team. Being on that team greatly influenced the person that I am now. And the nature of gymnastics is very individual and doesn't promote much of a team culture at competitions, or it promotes much of a team culture at competitions, but practice was not the same. Gymnastics practice involved a lot of cheering each other on and encouraging progress, at least with the younger kids. Once I was high school aged, the team dynamic shifted drastically. In order to fit in on that team, I had to make fun of other people and constantly be ready to defend myself verbally or physically. Roughhousing was common and always unexpected. I had to change myself a lot in order to fit on that team because I spent 15 hours a week with these people. I compromised some of my morals when making fun of people just so that I'd be viewed favorably and feel like a part of the team. What that team taught me was that fitting in did not mean belonging. I changed myself in a way so much that when I went to practice, I changed my thinking and my approach to how I interacted with people. I didn't like who I was, and it felt like there was nothing I could do about it. Now, when I stopped gymnastics last May, it felt like a burden had been lifted off of myself because I didn't have to change myself anymore. And now this takes me to my current and final team, the LHS varsity cheerleading team. When I tried out for this team, I had no idea what to expect. Last year, the team had an interesting culture. What I remember from being on that team is that we didn't work hard and I never felt like I really belonged. Every single practice resulted in the same people always talking to each other and me on the outside of any socializing. Only a select few juniors and seniors would even bother to converse with me on a regular basis. I spent much of the year keeping to myself because I had very few people on the team whom I could truly call my friend. But all of that changed with this year's team. From the first practice in June until the state competition, I felt like I truly belonged on the team. At practices, I felt that I could hold a conversation with anyone. I was starting to make personal connections with my teammates beyond just talking about teachers and homework. When we started our competition season, we had spent the entire summer working hard to learn as many new skills as we could. I felt that my team had the work ethic and the drive to win and be the best that we could be. We would run the routine over and over until our bodies ached and our lungs couldn't hold air anymore. We put in as many reps as we could, and our progress showed. Each competition saw our scores improving as things got better and better. Now, with as much work as we put in, however, I think that what helped our team the most was our bond. I felt like I belonged on this team, and I think I can say the same for everyone else. I didn't have to change who I was to feel welcome on the team, and I was allowed to be my genuine self without fear of judgment. This cheer team has shown me what it means to belong on a team, not just to be on one. As I conclude my story, I want to leave you with this final message. With everything you do in life, it's important to stay true to who you are. When you change who you are to better fit in, you don't feel like yourself because you really aren't. Changing yourself to belong is not belonging, it's conforming. Be your authentic self and you'll be happier because you're you. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. So now I would like to introduce our first faculty member who's presenting today. She is a personal finance teacher here at LHS, but she also does advocacy work through her blog. Please welcome Ms. Elizabeth Ray.
Libertyville this year, and back in the fall we got this request for writers for the Writers Expo, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I am a writer, but that's not my day job, right? So I am the kind of person that thinks everyone is creative. So even if you are an athlete and you're looking at the field and you're like, all right, where am I going to toss the ball next? Like, you are for sure creative. If you are the kind of person who can look at a chessboard and know what you and your opponent are going to do 4, 5, 6 moves ahead, you are definitely creative. If you are an artist and you're looking in in your art class and you're working on an art piece and you're looking at all different colors and you can put just the right things together, you are creative. And if you love to cook and you open up the pantry and you're like, all right, this spice and this one, and you put it together and it ends up being delicious, like, you are creative. And when I think of myself, my creativity comes out in my writing. And it always has. Now, you guys are sitting here, maybe you're a little bit past sleepover parties, but when I was a kid, my sleepover party, we had the greatest game. Did you play this game? The sentence game? Probably not. It was a little bit like Mad Libs, like you would write down like 2 or 3 lines, and sometimes you'd get 1 sentence written, and sometimes you'd get 3 sentences written, and you'd fold it over, and you'd pass it to the next person, and I kid you not, that was like my favorite game to play at sleepovers. And like all of my friends that I hung out were like wishy-washy, but they got into it. Once you start writing, if the words are coming to you, it ends up being so much fun. But let's go back to the beginning. I didn't just show up at an 8-year-old birthday party and start writing. I am one of 4 girls, so that's me on the end. And my 2 older sisters basically taught me how to read and write. So both my parents worked, and we played school in the basement all the time. We had a concrete floor, we would roller skate, we had this huge blackboard that my parents got for me. I'm pretty sure they wanted my sisters to teach me how to read and write so that they didn't have to. They'd already done it twice, and they were kind of like, you can take on the 3rd one. So I was always playing school with my siblings, and I just like really loved to read, loved to write. When I got to 2nd grade, my 2nd grade teacher had this thing. You had to journal once a week and put it in the basket, and she would read it and respond to you, and I was like, what? Somebody is gonna read my writing and give me feedback right away? To the point where I was like filling up these journals. I was not doing it once a week, I was doing it like once a day. To the point where Mrs. Strauss was probably like, Elizabeth, can you simmer down? Like, there are other students in the class that I need to respond to. And I was like, but you said you would respond to my writing as soon as I would turn it in. So I was hooked, for sure. To this day, I still journal, and I keep them in this old dusty picnic basket that I keep under my bed. And if you notice up at the top, they're duct taped or they're locked, and I've thrown away the keys, and I told my husband, please burn these upon my death. I've always had a little bit of drama in me. And he's like, burn them upon your death? No way, we are gonna like untape these things, read everything you wrote about us. I was like, all right, but then go back to like 3rd grade. So I'm always journaling. And I love different kinds of journals, right? So like when you find a journal that speaks to you, it beckons you to like write and fill it and all that sort of stuff. So journaling has always been in my blood. Then I had Miss Helbig, and she was big into like writing books. And my parents actually saved them. So this, like, first I wrote this thing called The Great Mystery. I don't know what happened to it. The mystery is definitely still underway. But then I wrote Dad Saves Christmas. And it's kind of funny. When you write, you can write about anything you want. And then there's a biography at the back, you know, a little bit about the author. Well, this story was based on my family, right? Like me and my 2 sisters, Melissa and Colleen. No mention of the 3rd sister. But in the biography, it says that I live in Connecticut with my family, including my sisters, Melissa, Colleen, and Kate. So I wrote her right out of my life. You can do whatever you want when you are ready. To this, like, we are very, very close now, so it's kind of a funny little story, but I guess not back then. In 4th grade, I got introduced to research, and again, I was like, oh, you can write about things you know about? You can write nonfiction? So needless to say, throughout my schooling, I wrote all the time. I was on the Lit magazine, I was on the school newspaper. But my plan to go to college was to study science. So my 11th grade English teacher actually blackballed me from AP English. And I didn't know this until after the fact when I came back. Because she's like, you were gonna take AP Sciences, AP Math, AP History. Somebody had to lighten your schedule. And she said, I know nobody else would do it. So my English teacher blackballed me from AP English. Devastated. I mean, can you just imagine someone who loves writing later finding out that their English teacher very specifically said, no, you cannot take the AP English class. But I do believe everything happens for a reason. When I graduated, my oldest sister gave me a journal, and in the front it just said, for you to write the next great American novel. And I was like, well, that seems like a lot of pressure, but okay. It's a really cool journal, so of course I just used it for journaling. But because I couldn't take AP English, I had to take English freshman year. Now, I was studying science, but the only class that I loved that was like filling my soul was my freshman seminar class. To the point where I was like, Mr. Delgado, I don't know that I'm supposed to be a biology major. I think I'm supposed to be an English major. And he was like, yes, do it. And then I was like, shoot, now I gotta tell my parents that think I'm gonna be a science major and go to med school because I had this grandiose plan that I'm changing my mind. And I was very nervous. So I came home from school in the summer and I was like, hey, I have a little thing to tell you. I don't think I'm gonna major in science, I'm gonna major in English. And they're like, all right, and what else? I was like, oh, what else? I just want to write. They're like, well, I think you need to major in something else. In addition. So I was like, all right. So I ended up majoring in economics, public policy, and English. Again, I love school. I couldn't get enough writing, and economics seemed like something that included a lot of writing. Public policy, definitely full of writing. My parents were like, all right, you can major in all that. So I do all kinds of writing. So y'all heard enough about my journaling. I've written tons of short stories. I find that the shorter format is better for me, given sort of parameters. I'm super busy, just like all of you guys, and if I needed to sit down and write a novel, I think I'd be in and out of it too much. Short story, you could spend weeks on it, get it done. I love short story format. I do a bunch of research. I do like to write nonfiction. When I was in college, I worked for a think tank and did economics research for them. It was really cool. I still have my Library of Congress reader-writer card. So yeah, research is great. Essays, again, in very nice short form again. Starting to get the picture. I think there's something magical about getting letters in the mail. There are a number of people that I still keep in contact with, and I write them actual letters. Of course I text, of course I send emails, but there is just something glorious about sitting down with a beautiful pen and a piece of paper and writing. So I definitely write letters. I also keep letters that are sent to me. It's so fun to look back, especially like from people that are no longer either in your life or are no longer available to be in your life, to look back at letters. So letters is a great form of writing. I have been a reader for people. So yes, I love reading, but being a reader is different. Being a reader is like when you're taking the first glance at somebody's piece of work and giving them sort of ideas and critiques about the overall flow. So reading is different than editing, and there's something really magical about being asked to be one of the people to read the first draft of someone's work. I have edited, so I've been in 2 writers groups, and I have friends that are in writing, and I've edited for people, and that is really amazing. You're past that first glance, and you get to take that fine-tooth comb, help with vocabulary, help with the flow of the work. So editing is another great sort of piece to the writing process. Of course, I edit my own work, but it is really awesome when somebody asks you, hey, would you mind looking at this? Give me your thoughts. Can you edit it? Back my first job, so when I got out of college, I went to work for Ernst & Young, and I was doing economics consulting and international tax work. And part of the reason why I loved that job was we wrote these economic trend reports. I know, like, simmer down your amazingness, like, it really was cool, but not everybody is into it. When I interviewed with Ernst & Young, part of the job interview was an hour in an office with like a couple of reports to put together a piece of writing. I was like, this job is for me. It's in the business world, but I get to do writing like right off the bat. So I've written a lot of economic trend reports. I have dabbled a little bit in screenplay. Screenplay is a totally different animal. I have a good friend that works for CAA out in Los Angeles, and she's dying for me to give her something. So I'm in my screenplay, I'm out of my screenplay, I'm back in it, I'm out of it. At some point, I'll probably finish it. I don't know when that day is, but it's sitting there. It's getting work done. During COVID, when we all had a lot of time on ourselves, I wrote a daily newsletter, and we wrote 125 issues of it, which is crazy to me. But we would write everything from like what was going on in our day, a little snippet about what was happening in the family. So back to my like high school journalism days, I was like, we're gonna write a newsletter. So 125 consecutive issues, and we sent it to our friends and family who also were incredibly bored playing with Legos and cooking whatever they had in their pantry. I've written speeches, and the big thing is right now that I keep this advocacy blog. So before we get to that, when I was in my early adult years, I decided I'm writing all the time. Then we had kids, and they were taking up a lot of my energy, and I needed to find a way to make sure I was still writing. It's so core to my being. So I found a writers group at the library, and I, joined it up, and I even still have the very first writer support group, sort of the notes I took that day, the goals. It's always really important to have goals for your writing. And I love this one. Our first goal from the person was journal at least 15 times. It's like, check, I can definitely do that. So after being in that writers group for a little while, there was kind of a subgroup that I wasn't even aware of. They slipped me a note at the end of the meeting. It was like all kind of secrecy, and I read it on the way out. It was like, we like your writing. We would like you to join our personal writing group. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So the library group, any writers can be a part of. And then our little subgroup was 7 writers that met every other week in one of our homes. We kind of traveled around. But the individual writing group, that little kind of private one, we would share each other's work ahead of time. We would edit, we would write together. So it was really cool to be invited into a little secret writers group where there were actual authors, actual journalists, and here's me, still just working for the corporate world. But back to this advocacy blog. So this is my very ongoing, just my core project at the moment. 8 years ago, when my youngest son was born, I have 4 kids, he came with an extra chromosome. So he has Down syndrome. And I knew nothing about Down syndrome. I mean, my biggest connection was I used to love that show Life Goes On with Becky Thatcher, and she had a brother named Corky who had Down syndrome. But outside of that, I knew nothing about it. And so I was definitely going to be learning as I was going. I also found that most of my family members didn't really know anything. I did find like some support groups, like just how to parent and different ways to kind of meet the needs of your little person. And so I just started writing. And I shared it, and I shared it with my family and whatnot. And they were like, you need to get this out. So my blog called Fintober was born. And every single October, which is the month that we celebrate Down syndrome, I write every single day. But I don't just write in October. I mean, it takes a long time to put together my different posts. And I write about what it's like to be a parent with a child with differences, what it's probably like for my kid to be a parent with Down syndrome, or to be a kid with Down syndrome, what are my hopes and dreams and all of those things. Each year, because October's a long month, 31, like it couldn't be in February where there's only 28 days, but anyway, there's 31 days. Every now and then you see, sometimes it starts in September, like I'm like, hey, get ready, it's coming. Or I wrap it up in November if I have that many things to say. And then this past October, I usually attach a video to it, and almost all of my videos got over 1.1 thousand views, which is pretty good for just a little, snapshot up into our life. During the month of October, I share it in all of my social media channels, and the feedback that I get is amazing. The people that read it and then share it are like, wow, it's nice to get a glimpse of what your world is like. The stereotype for people with Down syndrome typically is that they're happy all the time. For sure not. My little person is just like you, comes with a range of emotions. And it's nice to kind of share that with the world, that having Down syndrome doesn't make you better or worse. You weren't put on this planet for a specific reason, but there is something that I can learn from it and share with other people. I typically have, now that I've been doing it so long, I try to come up with a theme for each year because I'm still writing about the same person over and over and over each year, 31 times. So I've done like the alphabet. What is the same and different with using the alphabet as a backdrop? So for example, back in October 2022, I wrote a piece called I is for Ice Cream, Independence, IEPs, and Inclusion. Finn lives in an inclusive world, and to date, he knows no different. At home, Finn is 100% included in everything we do. So far, he's been included every time we expand his bubble. As a baby, he went to daycare and watched Hannah and Owen. As a toddler, we enrolled him in the same preschool that Liam attended. Last year, he played soccer in the town league. He takes swimming lessons with his peers. He goes to school right in our neighborhood. Finn is blissfully unaware that inclusion is not always the norm. The bubble he lives in, though, could pop at any minute. And that is why I work so hard to make sure he's prepared for the world, no matter what kind of world looks for him when the bubble pops. As an advocate, I'm also trying to make the world ready for him. Inclusion isn't a setting. It isn't a place or a way of doing things. It shouldn't even really be a philosophy or a mindset. It just should be. Inclusion is about making sure the environment is such that every individual or group can be and feels welcomed, respected, supported, valued, and able to fully participate. Inclusion should be the default setting in the human brain and heart. Finn should be welcomed into the pool, onto the field, and through the doors of the classroom without hesitation or a questioning look from anyone. In my experience, time is one of the most valuable variables that either makes our inclusive world work or not. It takes time to get to know each other so that peers can develop into friends. It takes time for teachers to modify work and figure out exactly what they are hoping the students learn from the lessons. It takes time for students to put their thoughts together and write their ideas, especially when fine motor skills are lacking or language processing is difficult. It takes time to have the hard conversations and find the common ground when the voices are varied, but it is well worth the effort because the outcome can change the paradigm. It takes time to build community where everyone is not just a member, but really, truly, and deeply belongs. When everyone belongs, we will no longer need to talk about inclusion, and then we will know that the time spent talking, working, and advocating has made a difference. So I did the alphabet because Finn loves ice cream. We are trying to make him as independent as possible. I would like to kick him straight out of the house when he gets old enough, just like those 3 other kids that live there. And then, of course, he has an IEP. But so that, I try to wrap all of my blog posts into like something about Finn and something we can teach the world. I did a bunch of posts on same and different. Finn is one of 4 kids in my direct family. There are lots of similarities, and there are definitely some differences. And then just this past year, my theme was around the clock, sort of like what is Finn's day like? So, he has all the regular things like getting on the bus and going to sports and, eating dinner, but then also he has a lot of different things like going to therapy and all that sort of things. So my piece for that one, this will be the last one that I read, was from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., hour, night, and overnight. Finn is in bed. He made it through his day. I have a few hours before I head upstairs. Most of the days with Finn are ordinary and easily flow right along. On those nights, after we put him to bed, the hours left belong to me. Those nights look the same as everyone else's. Catching up on work, watching a show, FaceTiming with family, reading a book, falling asleep on the couch. Some of the days with Finn are very long and very challenging. On those nights, after we put him to bed, the hours still seem to belong to Finn. My stress and worry about him claims my night. The easy and ordinary days far outnumber the long and challenging ones, yes, but those are the ones that can leave a scar. Sitting on the floor, feeling frozen, wondering what changes to make, strategies to try, who to talk to, what to do. I do think the same can be said of parenting all kinds of kids, having raised 3 others. There are always very long and extremely challenging times. You know the saying, the days can be long, but the years are so short. Maybe therein lies the difference between raising kids and raising a kid like Finn. I'm not sure that the years will be short. We are absolutely supporting him and filling his toolbox with skills and strategies and adaptations to handle the world, but will it be enough? Will he someday move out and make his way in the world? Will he want to? Will he be able to? I suppose we won't know until we know. So far, I have a 100% track record of making it through the tough situations because I have an amazing partner, fabulous family, and supportive friends. I lean on them when things get too heavy. When I am feeling a bit crushed under the weight of our life, it is a marvel what a chat, a hug, a walk will do to help heal my soul. It's not that often, but when I'm squashed, I know who can help me. If only I had that bounce back the next day personality that Finn has. The ability to go to bed and wake up free from the worries from the day before. I don't, yet I do keep going. And when the tough situation finally breaks, I might be weary, yet also refreshed. Exhausted, yet also motivated because we did hard things, dug deep, kept moving. But again, that's parenting, right? No matter the age or the chromosome count, parenting is not for the faint of heart. Finn will keep doing his best, and I will keep doing my best, and fingers crossed that our easy days keep outnumbering the hard. For me, blogging and doing this advocacy work and getting sort of the word out about what it's like to truly have a child with differences has been amazing. And the outpouring is amazing. And many of my readers are like, I can't wait for you to write a book about it. I'm like, I know, it's on my list, don't worry. But what I will tell you is if there is something you are passionate about, something that you want to get the word about, maybe blogging is like the right avenue for you to do it. Everyone is able to write. So sort of really quickly, when I write, some of my best writing happens while I walk, which seems kind of crazy. I'm a huge walker, and I always use that speech-to-text sort of feature in my phone if something comes across in my head. So use that feature, it's amazing. I also have to book a time with myself. So sometimes I book time at the library, sometimes I write after my family goes to bed, but I know that writing fills my whole heart, and so I book that time into my calendar because it's definitely a needed part of my schedule. And then also I keep Post-it notes and a notes app on my phone right at my bedside table. I can't fall asleep if I have a thought in my head and need to just get it down. So lots of writing always comes to me, sort of at the odd hours, never when I'm necessarily sitting down at the computer. So all I can say is this, we are all creative beings, and everyone has a story to tell or something that they want to share with others. And I really, really encourage you to find that time and start writing, and you just never know what is going to flow out of you. We all do have a story to tell, and I would absolutely love to read yours. triple type A personality that wants to try everything. So it's like, all right, the one thing that I haven't really tried yet is a novel. And again, I think that length is what's kind of keeping me at the moment. I have lots of ideas, but I love trying out all the different formats. I've done a little bit of poetry, but I just don't find that's fully my jam. I find that I do have some poetic writing in some of my short pieces, but and maybe it's kind of strange, but I label myself a writer, but I don't feel like I fit that poet category. But I find so much joy in the different variations that are out there. So writing nonfiction is amazing to me. And writing short stories is so nice to be able to like give a nice piece to somebody to read and they can read it in a short time and not be like, hey, do you have like 4 days to read my novel? So I really like all the different formats that are out there. And I must say, when my very first job told me that there was a writing component, I was like, I think I don't even need to look for another job. This is my jam. So, but yeah, I just like to try all the different things. Hey. I hope all of you are writers at heart, because you have stories in you that we're all dying to hear. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ray.
Yeah.
All right, so next up, our next faculty member is an English teacher by day and every once in a blue moon, according to him, a wannabe writer by night. Please welcome Mr. Tooley.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Hey, everybody. Any of you guys word puzzle people?
Yes.
A couple people? Okay. Anybody ever feel like they kind of do actually want to write creatively, but you're not really sure where to start? Like the options are just too overwhelming almost? Maybe, maybe not? Okay. So that's how I feel. And I oftentimes, after organizing an event or just coming to Writers Expo, I feel inspired to write. I've always, like I said, kind of wanted to be a writer as well as a teacher, but there's only so much time in a day, right? So sometimes I just try and create, like people have said today, boundaries that I can work within to help myself come up with some sort of product that, what I have found to be the case at least, makes me feel alive. And one of the themes I try and ask writers when we get up here is like, why do you do this? Why do you write? And for me, just the satisfaction of having a finished product is, there's a certain addiction perhaps to it. But this is an idea I had a bunch of years ago. So one of my fellow teachers was teaching American Lit, teaching The Great Gatsby, and he had his students go through the pages, pull out words and phrases that they liked, and they had to write a poem using those words and phrases and others. And I thought that's a really cool idea. I do love The Great Gatsby. I was afraid, though, that if I did it with one book, I might just end up with a voice that sounded like the author, sounded like, in this case, maybe F. Scott Fitzgerald. So I was kind of asking myself, how could I take this and run with it a little bit, making it a little bit more personal, a little bit more meaningful? And what I decided to do was first come up with a list of 16 books that I had read prior to my 16th year that were meaningful to me, that were just important to me, that influenced me in some way, shape, or form. Because I was going to then pull words from those books. Okay? But of course, each book has hundreds of pages, thousands of words. You could spend a lifetime picking out just the right words, right? And I have a tendency to overthink sometimes, so I didn't want to fall into that trap. What I did then was, again, kind of brainstorm, well, how could I make this a little bit more personal and meaningful for me? And this is what I landed on, which is my birthday, September 12th, 1979. Every birthday can be written numerically. So I divided it up, right? 9, 12, 19, 79. And then I went to the first page of each of the books on the list, and I just counted and circled, wrote down what the 9th, 12th, 19th, and 79th words were from each of the books. And that left me, and this is page 1 of A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. Anybody ever read that book? A couple people? Okay, highly recommended. That left me with about 64 words, okay? And what I decided, this is where like the word puzzle person within me, I decided to challenge myself, and I wanted to write a poem using only these words. Which, as soon as I took a look at the list, it scared me a little bit because I realized 4 of the words that I had pulled were actually names of characters from the books, like Margaret and Sam and Peter, and then James, possessive. And I immediately was like, well, how am I going to do that? Like, how am I going to use 4 characters' names in a poem that I want to be a personal expression of something I feel, right? Then it just kind of clicked. I was like, well, if I took all these words from books that were so meaningful to me from my childhood, why don't I just write a poem about the books that were meaningful to me from my childhood? Do we all have books from our childhood that mean something to us, right? They stick with us in a weird way, right? Even if we don't go back and reread them per se, they're with us, they're a part of us. So that's what I decided to do. And before I set out to actually write the poem, I was like, all right, I need some rules. I'm a big fan of having something as a guideline. I decided, number 1, I had to use every word, and only these words, like I said. Number 2, while I had to use every word once, I could only use it the number of times that I had actually pulled it from the text. So you can see the word the, I pulled 4 times. And I decided, okay, that allows me to use the word the 4 times, but I can't use it 5 times. I can use it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, but not 5. Peter was tricky for me, because Peter comes from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I do like that book. I don't like that series. I tried rereading it again as an adult and was bored stiff. My contention has always been, not always, lately my contention has been that C.S. Lewis was a bit overrated as a writer of fiction. But anyway, I didn't want people to think, and this is maybe a little bit neurotic, that book was super important to me. And so I didn't really want the name Peter in the poem, but then I realized, well, Peter is also an English word if you just take the capital letter and make it lowercase. So I decided, and this is where you get a little flexibility, right? I decided I can capitalize or decapitalize as I want. I also decided I can punctuate the poem however I want, and I can use the space bar however I want. Okay, so I had my rules, I had my words, and then typed them, I printed them out, I cut them out. Now this is actually the second attempt with books from my adult life. So it's a different set of words, but you get the idea, right? It's like those little magnetized words you see on people's fridges sometimes, right? You can move around, mess with them. That's what I did. We had a toddler and a baby at home, and my wife had bought some like baby gate or something that came in a big box. And so we had this big box top. I just threw all the words in there to contain them. And then periodically, I would go to the box. I left it on the dining room table, moved stuff around as I was inspired to do. And over the course of a couple weeks, working on it here by there, I ended up with a poem, and it was one that I felt pretty good about. So I think it's a cool activity. Here's the poem itself. It's called Sam, Margaret, and James's Page, and it acts as a sort of first line for the poem as well. Sam, Margaret, and James's page, every one was my own. His, her, their quilt, there about me like summer. But it didn't peter as sunsets had. Nothing died, started to blister. It's breakfast, through, but in. The very ground, now that of an old wood, it towers on. Even the small, the least, will affront time. So that's the 64 words. It's not actually 64, I think it's only like 50-something, right? But I was able to use all of them, and I felt pretty good about it. I felt like, man, this really captures how I feel about these books that were meaningful to me. So I decided, let's do this again. Like I said, with like 22 or 23 books that I read as an adult and really loved and found meaningful. And immediately I was like, crap, because the number 451 popped up. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm correct, Ray Bradbury, when he chose the number 451, I think it was because he called up like somebody and was like, hey, at what temperature does paper burn? And the person said 451, and he's like, okay, cool. And he never like fact checked it. So I don't even know if this is really the temperature at which paper burns. In my mind, when you say 451, everyone thinks of the same thing, Fahrenheit 451. So I was like, how am I gonna use that number in any sort of relevant way? But then I saw that John was something else I had pulled. And my Christian background, my Bible, church, school days, I was like, I know there's a book of the Bible called John. And I know John has at least 4 chapters. And I know I get to punctuate this poem however I want. I wonder if the book of John, chapter 4, has 51 verses. And it did. So then I went and read it, and it's a parable that Jesus is, or not a parable, it's a story about Jesus when he goes to visit Cana in Galilee, and he has this guy come up to him and it's like, Jesus, my son is sick at home. I need you to cure him. And Jesus is like, I can't go back to your home. Your son is cured, though, because you have faith. And he's like, okay. So he goes back home, and while he's arriving, someone comes out from his home, and it's like, your son is healed. And he's like, when did that happen? And they're like, yesterday, like 1 o'clock. And he's like, that was the exact moment I was talking to Jesus. That's crazy. And when I read this, I was like, okay, that means there's this kid, we're not told how old he is, who gets sick, at some point feels better. Kid could have been 3 years old. And at some point he's going to grow up and he's going to have no idea, he's not going to have no memory of this. But his mom and dad and other people are going to constantly tell him, Jesus healed you, it was a miracle. But he's got no proof, right? And it really resonated with me on like a spiritual level, a faith level. So with all of these words I had taken from these books that were important to me from my adulthood, I decided to write a poem kind of about this idea that this kid would grow up not having any proof of what actually apparently happened to him, right? So here's the poem I came up with, and part of the reason why I show you this is because I don't love this. And in fact, this is the second attempt. The first attempt, I really didn't like all that much. I like this one better, but I don't know. Anyway, so this one's called John 4:51. When father and mother died, simple missionary cardinals in flight, in that narrow way onto fair banks, in possession of it, the memory, him gone, the will hung around. You're a miracle. Shortly, that bad break blackened my every Sunday, everything in or unless in which I was thanked some. I fly beside that single drive, between fighting blocks he would let last. The playbook is spotted. I'm a theory. So that one was that one, okay? But either way, even though I don't really love this poem, I feel like the attempt was worth it. Like, I feel like I still was able to get something out of it, had that end product, like I said before, that gets me a certain sense of satisfaction. So I guess all that to say, there are tons of ways that you can create that don't necessarily feel 100% creative and yet that are still personal. So highly encourage you to try it, come up with your own sort of thing, and with the last couple of seconds, if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out. Okay, cool. Let me just say thank you. Thanks for coming.